Hey, this is Malika of Evanston Live TV, and I have with me returning guest now. He's a candidate, well, actually an incumbent for District 65 School Board, Joseph Hailpern. Welcome back,
Thank
Joseph.
thank you for having me, Malika.
Yes. So, our first meeting really was the D65 forum,
Mhm. Yeah,
and people are still talking about that forum.
yeah. That's that's good for democracy and good for kids, hopefully in the long run.
Yes, yes. I think it definitely opened up some conversation. So, um, what was your takeaway from that forum, being an incumbent?
Obviously, it was different being an incumbent the last time I was in a forum like that. I certainly knew the functions of the board. I'm an educator, so I knew a lot about the school systems, um, but I didn't know the inner workings of this board. Um, I mean, my take on it was it's great to have conversations. It's great to have dialogue. I think we're at a time in this country and in this community where we really have some non-negotiables on the table, and I think it's important for people to know where people stand on some issues. The Fifth Ward School is a perfect example.
Mhm.
Um, you know, the for me, issues like that are non-negotiable. They're rights that are the wrongs that have to be righted, and we have to find a way as a board to work together, to be collaborative with the community, and move our system and our community forward. But I think the forum was a great place to kind of start to get some of those issues out for people to discuss.
Yes. Now, I always wonder what it's like for the incumbents when you hear the new candidates, the opponents, coming on and having this view of you all, and well, not of you all personally, but of how you've performed on the board and how you've served the district. What are your thoughts on that? Because they were clearly coming out like people clearly are not in agreement with how the budget is going,
Mhm.
and you're pretty much the lead on the finance end of it on the board. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, you
Well,
know, I'm, I'm just wondering if how do people understand what's happening if you're not on the board?
so I think that's one of the biggest challenges, both as an incumbent, but also for people that are new. There's a lot that happens on the board. Um, we're very good as a board doing our business in the public eye. We have conversations at board meetings and ask questions and do due diligence on the public forum. People can watch it live, people can watch it later and ask questions. But we also have certain things, certainly as it relates to negotiations and personnel matters and litigation, things that happen outside the public eye. Those things are also very costly issues. Um, and, it's for me, the financial picture of the district is more about whether we're going to have the courage to reimagine what we want our school system to be, um, and making sure that we have the right dynamic of board members that are willing to support that reimagination, because um, we can't bring our kids back when we reopen to the schools that were shut down last March. There were too many students struggling, too many families feeling like they weren't getting what they needed out of our school system, and that's just too many children. One child is too many. I have 3 kids in the school system, and I know that when they come home with a bad day, how that impacts me as a father, and who I want to talk to about tending to that concern, because the district is the caretakers of the children during the day. Um, but we have to have that conversation, and the budget is a huge part of the sustainability of that reimagination.
Mm, mm. Now, I was talking to one of the opponents yesterday. I interviewed Donna Wang Sue, and she was talking about how some children are not even prepared for kindergarten entering into District 65. Um, it's been a huge focus on getting kids ready for ETHS, but she was saying that there's quite a few kids that aren't even ready for District 65, getting into kindergarten. And I was telling you before we started this interview that I was in a meeting with the Learning Bridge. And I mean, that program sounds absolutely phenomenal. Absolutely, because that is their focus to get children prepared for kindergarten. So there was a solution right there, and they've been around, I just learned, for over 70 years. So, uh, is District 65 uh, really utilizing the Learning Bridge? You know,
I,
to
I can't speak. I can't speak to whether District 65 is utilizing the Learning Bridge as an entity, as a partner. I can say that um, JEH obviously is the District 65 Early Childhood Center, so that handles their pre-K programming. That's our lone site that is a part of our budget. It's a part of our district. It's one of our schools.
Mhm,
Um, but we do have these partner organizations like Cradle to Career here in Evanston,
mhm,
where I would hope that our early childhood leaders and our school district leaders would be great partners with entities like the Learning Bridge in supporting and making sure that our pre-K sister schools throughout the community are all working towards the same goal. Because these kids, similar to all of our kids from all of our schools, end up at ETHS. All those kids from all those early childhood centers end up in our schools,
mhm,
and we really want to make sure um, that we're successful being collaborative.
mhm,
I think that's one of the things that our board actually does really well. We're very different people, right? I'm a white man, and I have been on a journey myself, but we do work well together, both when we disagree and when we question and moving through the issues. And I think our district team needs to make sure that they have a seat at the table and Cradle to Career that is helping to coordinate the efforts of that early childhood programming, not just for JEH, but also for the city. I think it's really important.
mhm. Now, when you hear the criticisms about how the finances are handled with District 65 that impacts programming, so some programs have to, you know, be taken out of the school. Um, some people are fighting for programs to be put in place that people believe are needed. How do you all determine which programs need to go, which need to stay, and then dealing with those parents? Um, so I was told about the acceleration program that was taken out, and some parents felt like, yeah, it should be taken out because it's for white and Asian children. Okay, and then black children are kind of left out of it or not really dealt with if they are in that program. Um, and so many parents want to believe some other programs should be put in place. Some parents believe save money, put everybody in the same class, forget this separating kids, you know, with this metric system because you don't really know a child's learning style. They could be just as brilliant as the kid next to them, but because they're receiving the information differently or they learn differently, then why are you going to keep them back here and excel this kid? How do you handle all of that in terms of money? Just
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things that come to mind right away as you're asking that question. The first is that how we spend our money says what we value, um, and we need to really remember that our budget is a reflection of our values, and that there will never be enough money for everything that we want to do, and there will also never be the right time to to talk about whether we can afford something. Right? There's never the right time to talk about specific programs, especially when you have to choose and when you have to make those decisions. And that's where the values of the district really are told. That's where, for me, these are non-negotiables, right? Um, I, I can't let go of the idea of I get the argument of the financial issues that come with thinking about building a new school, but that's still not up for grabs just because of money. That's a historical wrong that needs to be righted. When you talk about something like the acceleration program, I'm an educator. I have lived and led buildings. I'm a school principal, where we have had acceleration, grade level acceleration in my building for mathematics, where we have done the heterogeneous grouping and relied on the gift of the teacher to differentiate to a very wide range of learners. I think when we look at children, particularly young children, um, learning is not linear, right? Kids peak, they learn something, they practice it, they learn it. And when you have a heterogeneous setting that's not tracked, that's not separating them, you give kids the opportunity to learn in their own time and come to that confidence and skill set in their own way. And if it's off the calendar, they haven't lost the opportunity to then accelerate at that moment. But if you've placed me in a tracked class in September and I peak in October and I'm still in that lower class, I have no opportunity in that room. But
Mm,
if I'm in a heterogeneous setting and I hit a peak or something clicks for me, I now have an opportunity within that space because I've got peer groups at different levels and different skill sets and styles. And I think there's a lot of value to having that conversation. I think we have to do a better job educating people on the fact that when we put heterogeneous kids together, our community is better for it. We are creating more opportunities for students. We're not taking anything away from the accelerated students. And I'll put the caveat out there, Malika, that there's obviously a percentage of our population that might qualify as gifted. There's lots of debates within the community on what does that mean. There are always going to be exceptions to what I'm describing right now, and we have to be able to meet those students' needs as well. I just think that um, the the acceleration example is very narrow um, in scope, and I think there are some general best practice ways that schools can go about meeting most kids' needs. And we still have to make sure that we tend to the exceptionalities because those parents want their kids to be seen too.
hmm Yeah, what determines if a child is really gifted? Like I agree, there are some kids who are just beyond just, I mean, they're little geniuses, and then there are some kids who just pick up on things a little sooner than others, but they're all pretty much moving together.
Sure.
You do have, I mean, it's usually just maybe one, two, maybe three kids who are just exceptionally gifted. How do you determine that?
Well, I think the district needs to have a system for how they monitor student progress. And I think we have a lot of assessments that students do take. Um, some cases it might be too much, and sometimes it's not enough or doesn't give a complete enough picture, but those students stand out in those assessments. I think teachers also know those kids. They meet them in the classroom when they ask a question and they get that exceptional answer, or when they give kids the opportunity to do work, those kids also stand out. And I think we also in our district have to recognize that we have some examples to lean on. King Arts and Bessie Rhodes,
Hmm
they have an ability to tend to students across a grade band differently than the elementary buildings that have to jump to a whole different school for middle school. Um, we can have some models built here to lean on that I think can be very useful.
hmm Um, so the STEM school conversation got heated at the District 65 forum on Evanston Live TV. A lot was brought out, definitely opened up some conversations. So the really heated conversations started happening after the forum, and it's still continuing. So I think when, I don't know if you had said, or I don't know if it was who said it. I think it was you who said we would have to close a school in order to open a STEM school. So is that true? Because then Orrington was the school that was brought up.
Yeah, and then it blows up from there once you name a school, right?
Yeah, it
Um,
blew up, and next thing you know, I'm getting emails, and yeah, yeah,
I
you
think
want to
I
explain
think the
that?
first sorry.
Yeah.
I think the first thing to say is that there's been no discussion about schools. I think Orrington has come up over the years because of its proximity to Northwestern and Northwestern's proclivity for acquiring buildings um, in its area. Um, it also has come up because it's notorious for, I think the kindergarten rooms are in the basement there. And over the years, there's been some flooding, and some of our buildings are a little bit older and cost a little bit more to maintain. And when we talk about doing a building and facility study, what we're trying to do is figure out which of our schools are in the best shape, kind of like your house. What do you have to fix first? What is worth fixing versus replacing? And um, and I, Orrington is kind of the easy one to throw in there because it's had some known issues, but it's not something that's been discussed at length. It's not something that's been investigated. It's not something that the community of Orrington needs to worry about. I've wondered the same thing about a school like Bessie Rhodes or Walker, smaller schools. My kids go to Walker. Uh, when you look at the smaller schools, are we able to close a school and absorb those students into programs elsewhere? Um, these are conversations we have to have, and anybody who says that we can avoid talking about those big issues haven't studied the issue enough. But it's something that we'll have to face this upcoming board as we do a facility study and a demographic study to see whether or not our 18 schools are viable for the long term.
About how much does it cost to open up a STEM school in the Fifth Ward? How much would, about, what do you think?
I'm really pulling out of a hat here for a number. It would cost us about $150,000 just to do the facility study to understand our buildings and infrastructure in a way that would help us make decisions. To purchase land, I couldn't even guesstimate, but I think to build a proper school that would probably service pre-K through 8, if we wanted to build a dream house over there that services all the kids and was a community center and had the amenities that we need, I think we would have to be looking at least $20 million. That is, again, that has not been costed out. But I think if we're going to do this, we need to do it right. We need to build a school that will be there for 50 years in good health. We're talking about a real significant investment in our community.
Mm. Mm. And because the city, operates on its own, and then you have District 65, where else can that money come from? Because clearly, District 65, you all are saying we don't have the money to build a new school. So a school would have to be closed in order to build a new one.
We,
Go ahead.
we would still have to do some strategic changes to in the budget, right? We would need to look at our bonding capacity and look at some alternative revenue bonds that could be used for infrastructure capital usage. We would need to look at we would need to look and see not just closing of a school, but how can we make our system more efficient? Mm-hmm. Right? Everyone has talked about how the city can fundraise to get Robert Crown there. Maybe we can work collaboratively with 202 and with the city of Evanston and see that this is a good thing for all of us. Mm-hmm. We need to operate it and run it efficiently, but maybe to get there, we need to lean on each other. Maybe we need to talk to Northwestern and seek out their partnership as well. I love what Henry's doing. He is keeping this conversation alive, and it is thriving with his energy. And I think we're closer than we've ever been, but we need to make some serious strides to repair the wrong that's been done in this community. And not just talk about whether people want a school or not, but actually get some pen to paper and have these ideas fleshed out so we can start acting.
That would be wonderful if Northwestern, since they want to take the Orrington property, it would be wonderful if Northwestern stepped up and said, you know what, let's give the Fifth Ward a school. I mean, and they can name it Northwestern STEM if they want, they want to put their name on it. They definitely have $20 million.
Yeah, and I don't know that they would want to buy Orrington, but there's been that chatter over the years that might be a nice property
property.
for them to have. Yeah.
Yes, yes. That would be great. That would be absolutely awesome if Northwestern did that. Um, and I think that would quiet down some of the noise that a lot of the Evanstonians, the gripes that they have with Northwestern. So if they made a gesture like that, that would be wonderful. And I even believe the reparations program, that is reparations, give back what was taken. And Henry shouldn't have to run around here asking for money for help. With reparations, it
Yeah.
should just be given because it was taken away. It was an injustice taken away, and it should be put back. And that's $10 million. And I truly believe Alderman Robin Ruth Simmons will get more than 10 million. Um, I mean that will be also, so there's ways for this to happen. So realistically, I mean, I think it's something that should just get started on right now. Henry is keeping the conversation going, but it's like I think he's ready for some action, some real steps towards it. So when do you see that happening?
Well, I think in the next 12 months we're going to be pushing to take action on the facility study, um, and truly starting to understand the buildings, the pipes, the boilers, right? Everything about them, the bricks, the roofing, um, the health and safety of these buildings, and what it would take to bring them um, to good health, but also whether or not they would have value in a different way. And that's going to be a really hard conversation for the community, but I think we need to start having it within the next 12 months. Included in those 12 months, as a parallel project, we need to study the demographics of our community. All the children that are in the schools, in the neighborhood schools, except for the Fifth Ward, they don't all keep coming from the same houses, right? We have to study the patterns of where people live, where people are having kids, and um, and make sure that our boundaries are in order so that the schools can be as efficient as possible, and see if there's some opportunities there to create some efficiencies. Again, these are hard conversations. When you start talking about people's schools and where their children go to school and where you draw the boundary lines, these are serious topics, and the board is going to have some real honest conversations as a group in public to discuss these matters, but they're certainly on the docket for the upcoming year.
Why do you think those conversations are so difficult? So right now, uh, people pretty much know you're going to the school that's in your neighborhood where you live. So why is it a difficult conversation when there's talk of a new school in the Fifth Ward? If you live in or in that vicinity of the Fifth Ward, then that's where you're going.
This is all about race, right? This is highlighting race and the racial tension in our community. And I speak as a white cisgender man. Um, white men have to be in a just relationship with people of color in public and on full display. And I think I'm a candidate who does that. And I think the tension that people bring to conversations like the one you're suggesting are people who are on a journey and aren't having a just relationship with people of color in our community. Because it is, I said it in the forum, it is a matter of privilege for me to say that I can take my time with this. But that is something that white people can say, um, just like um, just like in my household with my wife, we can decide, absent actual relationships that we have and family that we have who are within the gay community, we can decide when we want to talk about that with our children. That is a privileged conversation that my wife and I can have with our kids. But a gay couple doesn't choose when to have that conversation with their kids. That's your life. That is your livelihood. That is your love, right? That is your family. And the same goes when we talk about race in this community. We talk about privilege. Um, we have said previously within many board reports that diversity in this community has come on the backs of Black and brown children and families. And that's what needs to stop. And white people need to acknowledge that. White people need to come along on that journey and join the conversation. And if you can't join the conversation, if you don't have the words or the comfort, experience the discomfort and be present and be supportive and understand that this pain doesn't go back 5 years. It goes back generations in this community.
Yes.
Um, it was here when I was a boy. I went through these schools, and this conversation was here 30 years ago. It was here 60 years ago.
Mm, mm. So, and that brings me to, I mean, again, I've said it to Anya Tanya Vudi, I've said it to Biz and Sula. My heart and prayers go out to uh, Dr. Horton and the board for all of the hate that you all are getting. So clearly, you're doing something. You're doing something right that you're getting so much resistance and hate. So, I want to be the first to say thank you for not reopening the schools during a pandemic because you didn't want to risk losing one child. And that's all it came down to. My understanding of it, how I viewed it, was that Dr. Horton and the board did not want to risk losing one child during a pandemic that none of us had experience with. No one, no prior boards, the residents, none of us. So, and it was always new information coming out about what was safe, what wasn't safe. Like every day it was changing. So, why would you want to risk a child's life, sending them to school when the safety guidelines were always changing? So, I thank you all for putting the children's lives above any and everything else. Um, and I hate that you all were receiving such hate
Thank you.
regarding that. So Evanston Live TV, I want to say thank you for thinking of the children's lives as priority number one,
Oh,
um, and protecting them and your staff, your teachers. You're thinking of them as well.
yeah.
Um, so with that, I mean, how are you all handling? Because you're still getting the hate. How are you all handling that?
I think we all probably handle it differently. Again, I have to name the privilege that I have as a white man. That the hate that comes to me looks different than the hate that goes to um, our board president and our board vice president, who um, who sit there proudly and openly living their true selves and leading with their true selves. It comes at them differently than it does to me and Dr. Horton for sure. Um, but it is the right work. It is the good work, and I think it's for our community. It's to make our community better. We have to get through this. I often think of points like this of, is it a growing pain or is it a problem? And I think this is a growing pain for our community, and growing pains you have to get through. If it was a problem, we'd have to find a way to fix it. Um, I realize that some of the people that send us postcards, they're from far away, and we're not going to change their mind. Um, but as a governing body, our job is to put our kids in the classrooms so that they can get the best opportunity for a well-rounded education that they can, to be their very best selves and make up their own minds about how they want to be in this world. Um, and that is something um, that we have to stay on course with. Um, the the hate is hard, but it is. I think it comes with naming race in issues. I think it comes with the political climate of our country. I think you know, why would it be such a debate this year or 4 years ago whether or not you would allow children in public schools to watch an inauguration? Um, I get that it might have been for people in our community, it might have been harder 4 years ago um, than it was this time, but the the civic opportunity we have with our children to be on full display, to bear witness to some moments and to celebrate other moments, we have to engage in that with our kids. And if the board backs down from those conversations, how can we expect our teachers to stay strong? How can we expect our school leaders to stay strong?
Mhm. Well, I will tell you how I see it is, if this country is ever hit with another pandemic again, God please no, but if it does, whoever's on the board in the future, later, when your terms are over and it's a new board, they're going to look back and be like, how did the board handle it back in 2020, 2021? And the one thing they're going to look at is they did not lose one child or one teacher to that virus because they closed the schools and they didn't reopen it until they absolutely felt it was safe. And I think that speaks more than any of the hate mail that you're getting, is that boards years from now will look back on this and say they did the right thing because they didn't lose anyone.
And I'll share an example with you, Malika. I shared this with a couple people who reached out to us on the board, clamoring for the doors to be opened. And I totally understand their position. Or everyone's living this pandemic differently. So I don't judge anybody for wanting to hunker down at home or wanting the schools open. But I shared with a couple people. I mean, you're right. We haven't lost anybody to COVID as a result of our schools being open. And I do have an experience when I was in third grade at Walker School, losing a classmate to an illness. And in the middle of the school year, one of those experiences where he went home sick on a Friday and didn't come back on Monday. And every birthday and every death day of his, I still think about it and still carry it, because it was that impactful of an experience. And it did inform some of my decisions and some of my opinions going into this, because nobody should have to carry that. No children should have to experience death in the way that I remember experiencing it myself. And I hope we can get through this pandemic, even after our schools reopen, with all the mitigation strategies, in a safe way, with all of our community intact, because that's what we're here for, as the kids.
Yes, yes. To our guests, that's powerful. I don't know if you've told that story out to the public before, but
You're the first, Malika.
yeah, that is powerful. You remember the body retains that kind of information, and you're like, oh no, that's not going to happen to anyone else.
And my teacher at the time was Mrs. Mitchell, Pat Mitchell,
Hmm.
who went on to become the principal over at Bessie Rhodes when it opened up.
Hmm.
And to tie the community back in, when I went into education and I needed to find classrooms to observe in, I went back to that woman, that strong, short black woman, who was a school leader. And I don't remember many positive things in that classroom that year, but I clearly have a tethered relationship with her that brought me back into education and connected me with her. And as good as that moment is afterwards, I wouldn't ask my kids to endure losing a classmate or a teacher, for anything.
Hmm. Thank you for that, Joseph. To our guests that are watching, if you have a question, please use the raise your hand signal. Okay. Marissa Wallstrom has a question.
Hi,
Hi, Marissa.
um, I am a Dawes parent, so I just want to thank you, first of all, for your service to our students and on the board. My question today is about the budget prioritization process. It's an interesting process so far, with people giving their thoughts, but I just wonder, how are you going to weight and prioritize things? I'm happy to hear about the building study, because just coming from Dawes, we have, I'm sure as you're aware, we have like an annex that is not connected to our main building. So we have some safety and security issues already. And
Yep.
just thinking about the cost of that, and yet the need to stay within budget, and to even cut. So it just makes me wonder, how can you possibly do all of these things? So if you could share some of your ideas, that would be helpful.
Sure.
Thanks.
And it's days like today that I think about the annex at Dawes, and the kindergartners having to leave that annex just to go to the other part of the school, or everybody else going to music. So the prioritization process has a few parts. One, it has obviously the open meetings, for people to hear that it's an issue. The thought exchange that we put out, garnered thousands of thoughts, and I think we have almost 10,000 ratings within the thought exchange, where people had a chance within the community to go and say, I like that thought, I don't like that thought, and kind of on a Likert scale rate them. And so through that, I haven't seen it yet, but the analysis will break down the thoughts and the ideas that were placed in the thought exchange, and we will see some of the weighting from the community and the community's input. Obviously, there's an issue that if people don't engage, then their input isn't in that thought exchange. And so we pivot to tomorrow. There's a board cafe at 4 o'clock. There's 2 board cafes coming up for community members to join. It's specifically about the budget, about the finance issues, so that we can hear questions and ask people to share their thoughts. And that's an important place for ideas to be shared. The board cafe is at 4 o'clock tomorrow with Anya, Tanya, Budi, and myself. Then we pair that information initially with the low-hanging fruit, trying to find efficiencies that aren't about the classroom, right? We're not going to take this information right now and talk about class size and school closings and things like that. That's later in the process. That gets paired with information like a facility study and long-term financial planning. We need to do a 5-year master facility plan, 10-year master facility plan. Again, similar to you would do for a house, to really pair what people want with what the actuality is. And if for some reason those things are in conflict, then we need a public space to discuss and articulate to the community why we can't go with what the community wants necessarily if they're in conflict. That's kind of where we are right now. We have to include our stakeholder groups, not just parents, but non-parents. I think we need to talk to our teachers about how to create efficiencies within the classroom space. We're always asking teachers to do more. It's a horrible question to even ask. As an educator, I totally get it, but it's fair to say, would you rather do it this way or that way, right? This way might be easier, but this way is more efficient and saves different programs or things within the school system. And those are conversations that are going to be ongoing for a couple of years. This is not a one and done process. This is going to take 2 to 3 years to come to full fruition and have fiscal sustainability, balanced budgets that don't rely on a referendum to balance.
Joseph, what would you say to the opponents who've never been on the board before, in terms of handling the budget? Like what would you advise them? Anyone wanting to come on the board?
Join the conversation. I mean, this is not an opportunity for people to hold their ideas close. We need all ideas on the table. Being chair of the committee means that I get to host the meeting, but it doesn't mean I make the decisions in isolation from anybody. It's actually about ensuring that due diligence of the process is followed, that we do get input from stakeholders, from people, to make sure that we're not making decisions that don't have grounding in what the people want. And I would say, get ready to learn, because if you work in the finance world, the school finance world is a little different. There's nuances to it. And if anybody can come in and help this process, I would love to have them on our team.
How do you deal the difference? Some people, you have your conservatives that look at a budget differently, and then you have your Republicans and you have your Democrats, and it's just real. So how being chair, how do you handle that? Because those are 2 different eyes looking at the same piece of paper, balance sheet, and how do you deal with that?
Well, the first thing is when we talk about a school budget and a district budget, I think it's important for people to remember that while it is funded by taxpayers. Um, I don't think, for me, I don't think anybody should be surprised that it's one of the highest taxed parts of your tax bill. We want our schools to be palaces for our children, and that does cost money. So if this is about lowering your tax bill so that we can try to do better schools, those ideas are in conflict already. We need palaces and beautiful playgrounds and the resources to get the job done that include great teachers that are supported. And um, for me, that's something that I will pay higher taxes for that. But that's, we have caps and what we can levy and things like that. Um, but we need people to come into the conversation. We talked about different fiscal priorities. Um, how we negotiate contracts is a big deal. We do need to find a way to rein in our contracts to be closer to CPI, because CPI is the lever with which we can levy the taxes against. And if we are exceeding CPI, then we are always going to be outspending what's coming in, and we have to find a way to fix that. While at the same time, we have to recognize that CPI over the past 10 years has not been very high, and people still have rent and people still have to buy groceries, and costs of those things are exceeding beyond CPI. And so we have to reconcile that as a community too. Um, and that's where all ideas are in fact welcome. But 80% of our budget are in humans. They are in the great people who take care of our kids. And that includes teachers, all the way down to the people who keep the buildings running. Um, Omar and his team that are going to keep it clean during a pandemic while we invite kids into the building. We have to make sure that everybody is taken care of in an equitable way.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, Joseph, this has been a great conversation. I feel like I've learned a lot more about you with this one-on-one. Of course, during the forum, everything was on a time, but yeah, the story about losing the classmate is like still, I'm still on that. I have not left that. So I thank you for being human and making humans a priority with the budget, with COVID, with everything. I mean, that's apparent that that's who you are, that that's where you are, and we appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for hosting the forum and for having an opportunity for all the candidates to come and have the one-on-one so people can learn more about us and make their decision on election day.
Yes, yes, and please let people know, because I'm going to release this out to the public today. Let people know where they can contact you, that if they have more questions or want you to elaborate.
Yeah, Joey Ford D65 at Gmail is the email address, and Joey FOR district65.com is the website. And you can also access my board email through the District 65 website and send communications there, and I'll be happy to engage.
All right. Thank you so much, Joseph.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you. Thank you.
Stay
And
warm today.
I will. You too. Be safe out there. And thank you to our guests who attended today. And to all of you out there watching the video, this is Joseph Hailpern. He's the incumbent running to remain on the board, District 65. And I'll be sure to put his contact information in the description of this post. So please engage, reach out to him, get further explanation on his answers, ask your questions, just get your questions answered and just stay engaged and get to know him. Stay tuned here at Evanston Live TV. We are going to have more candidates, more forums, and this Evanston election is heating up. It's heating up, and they're just getting started. This is wonderful, though. It's been great to see so many of you out there watching and engaging in all of this. And it's so important that we put the right leaders in place. We know how important that is because we just got rid of a bad one. So we know how wrong it can go if you put the wrong one in there. So, yes, people, stay engaged. This is Malika, Evanston Live TV.